red banner fluttered in the wind, promising unity, strength, and a glorious future. But beneath that banner, millions stood in ration lines, lived in cramped concrete blocks, and whispered the truth only within the safety of their kitchen walls. This is the untold reality of life in the Soviet Union. In this video, we step beyond the slogans and into the heartbeat of everyday Soviet life. Chapter 1. The curtain falls, the stage remains. The Soviet Union, an empire built on ideology and steel, where the hammer and sickle soared high above the contradictions of daily life. On the surface, the USSR projected an image of utopia, a classless society where every citizen contributed to the glory of the state. But behind the curtain, in cramped flats, grey queues, and whispered conversations, another reality pulsed. This was not a land of easy binaries. Life in the USSR was not merely miserable nor purely heroic. It was complex, a mosaic of pride and deprivation, official slogans and underground whispers. To understand the Soviet experience is to explore that tension between the stage-managed truth and the lived one. Chapter 2. Home is where the party sends you. For most Soviet citizens, home was a kommunalka, a communal apartment where multiple families shared kitchens, bathrooms, and sometimes even the same telephone. Privacy was rare. Families were allocated space by the state, often with only 9 to 12 square meters per person. Later came the Khrushchevkas, 5-story prefabricated housing blocks named after Nikita Khrushchev. These were modestly sized but revolutionary in promise. They offered private apartments to nuclear families for the first time. Built quickly and cheaply, they were grey, uniform, and soulless, but they were also a symbol of progress. Yet no matter how small or uniform, these flats were filled with life. Inside, children played on carpets while parents hung heavy drapes to keep the cold out. Samovars hissed with tea. Grandmothers told stories of the Tsarist past, while radios crackled with patriotic anthems. The home was both refuge and surveillance zone, where every word might be overheard, every visitor a potential informer. Chapter 3. The Kitchen Table Republic. In a society where dissent was dangerous, the kitchen became the nucleus of personal truth. Families gathered here not only to eat, but to speak freely, albeit in hushed tones. These were the kitchen table republics, tiny islands of candor in an ocean of state control. While official broadcasts lauded the party's achievements, people swapped jokes mocking Brezhnev's speeches or shared banned literature, samizdat, hand-typed pages of forbidden poetry, memoirs, or novels. Here, someone might risk reading Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago, or even a smuggled copy of Orwell's Animal Farm. The kitchen was where people practiced doublethink, not in Orwell's dystopian sense, but as a survival mechanism. They clapped at parades and cursed the shortages at home. They repeated state slogans by day and mocked them by night. Chapter 4. In line, we wait. A defining feature of Soviet life was the queue. To live in the USSR was to wait. For bread, for meat, for toilet paper. Sometimes people joined a line without knowing what was being sold, only to discover after hours that it was sardines or vacuum tubes. The cause wasn't incompetence, it was systemic. The centralized economy, geared more toward heavy industry than consumer needs, simply couldn't keep up. Even basics like shoes or winter coats required time, connections, or both. Ironically, scarcity created community. People in line became temporary comrades, trading gossip, recipes, or frustration. Some even became friends. But queues also exposed the cracks in the utopia. If the USSR was the workers' paradise, why was there never enough? Chapter 5. The billboards lied. The streets of Soviet cities were awash with propaganda. Billboards proclaimed, "Glory to the workers." Murals depicted muscular men and joyful women building socialism hand in hand. Portraits of Lenin watched from school walls and factory floors. The message was clear. The future was bright, the West decadent, and the USSR was humanity's last great hope. But these posters couldn't conceal the dissonance. A Soviet woman might walk past a mural of abundant harvests and head into a store with empty shelves. A young man might read about housing progress while sleeping on a cot in his parents' hallway. The gap between official truth and lived reality widened with every cracked pavement and missing light bulb. Still, many believed. Propaganda was not just manipulation, it was a kind of theater. And like any performance, it worked best when the audience wanted to believe. And in a world where cynicism could cost you your job or worse, believing or pretending to often seemed safer. Chapter 6. Pride in the Shadows. Despite it all, there was pride. Real, complicated, stubborn pride. Pride in surviving. Pride in the achievements that did exist. The defeat of Nazi Germany, the launch of Sputnik. Yuri Gagarin's smile beamed across the stars. There was pride in family, in the resilience of parents who raised children through war, famine, and purges. In the artists and scientists who innovated under restrictions. In the teachers who instilled literacy and the doctors who treated entire towns. This pride wasn't always about the party, it was often in spite of it. It was pride in Russian literature, in Ukrainian traditions, in Armenian music. Cultural identity endured, sometimes hidden under official slogans, other times folded into them like code. Chapter 7. The Underground Pulse. While the state prescribed what music you could play, what books you could read, and what films you could watch, an underground culture thrived. Western jazz, Beatles records smuggled in from Poland, jeans traded like gold. These were the treasures of youth. Illegal recordings called Röntgenizdat, music etched onto discarded X-ray films, passed from hand to hand, bending the rules with every scratchy tune. Teenagers risked arrest for copying punk lyrics or drawing cartoons that mocked the party. Art was protest. Graffiti wasn't just vandalism, it was rebellion. A simple question scrawled on a wall could echo like thunder through a city's silence. Poetry readings in someone's basement became acts of quiet defiance. This underground world wasn't only about rejecting Soviet values, it was about reclaiming agency. In a society of rules, breaking one became a way to say, I exist. Chapter 8. Childhood in the Red Shadow. For Soviet children, life was full of contradictions. They were taught to idolize Lenin from their earliest days, joining the young pioneers with red scarves around their necks. At school, they were taught mathematics, science, and Marxist-Leninist theory with equal intensity. But their world was not joyless. There were games in the snow, summer camps on the Black Sea, and stories shared by torchlight. There was pride in space heroes and wonder in nature. The state tried to shape their minds, but it couldn't erase imagination. Still, they learned early the art of silence. Some overheard their parents talking cautiously about politics and understood instinctively what not to repeat. Even in innocence, children bore the weight of the curtain. Chapter 9. Faith in the Forbidden. Religion, once central to Russian life, had been driven underground. Churches became museums, priests were arrested or silenced. Yet faith endured in quiet prayers, in candlelit services held in secret, in icons hidden in drawers. Some believers risked imprisonment to attend underground masses. Others practiced quietly, baptizing children in whispers and tears. For many, religion became a form of resistance, not just spiritual, but political. Under a regime that claimed to be the sole source of truth, to believe in something else. God, soul, eternity was to reject the monopoly of the party. That quiet defiance echoed louder than any anthem. Chapter 10. Collapsing Illusions. By the 1980s, the facade began to crumble. Economic stagnation, war in Afghanistan, and the Chernobyl disaster exposed the rot behind the red banners. Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika pulled back the curtain, but what lay behind shocked many. Truths long hidden were spoken aloud, mass graves were uncovered, Forbidden books were published. The queue still remained, but now people talked about why they were hungry. For some, it was too late. For others, it was the beginning of healing. Chapter 11. The human behind the hammer and sickle. To live in the USSR was to live between two realities, the one painted by the state and the one etched into everyday life, between ration books and space flights, between parades and poverty, between slogans and silence. Yet those who lived it rarely saw themselves as merely oppressed. They were workers, dreamers, survivors, artists. They made jokes, fell in love, and raised children. They endured. The USSR is gone. Its statues toppled. Its songs faded into history. But the people, those who once lived behind the curtain, carry their stories still. And in those stories, we find not just a cautionary tale, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. If this glimpse into Soviet reality made you see history in a new light, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more untold stories from the past, and hit the bell so you never miss a deep dive like this one.